I hooked up with the supermodel wife of the guy my wife cheated with, and I'm planning to get divorced soon. We tied the knot almost 3 years ago after dating for nearly 5 years. About a year ago, she began an affair with a colleague. I first became suspicious when I noticed his car parked outside our home one day. That nagging feeling led me to hire a private investigator and, sure enough, I gathered solid proof that they were involved. Anger welled up inside me, and then, out of the blue, I got a call from the coworker's wife. She had discovered the affair as well, but all she had were some text messages between them. On the other hand, I had receipts and evidence of their outings, so we decided to confront them together. We started meeting up often to discuss what was happening. She confided that she had suspected something was off ever since she was pregnant. They have 3 kids together. At one point, we came up with the idea to sleep together as a form of revenge. We went through with it, and honestly, it felt good. We've been hooking up regularly since then. She's an incredible woman, and I must admit, she's better in bed in some ways than my own wife. Mostly, though, I'm filled with anger toward my wife. In some of the texts between her and her affair partner, they mocked his wife, saying horrible things like she'd gained weight and that her body was ruined. It's hard to believe my wife would say such things about another woman. She even made cruel jokes about my fertility issues, claiming I'm not a real man because my chances of having kids are low. I don't feel guilty about my own affair. I actually enjoyed the sex life I had with the coworker's wife much more than what I had with my own. My wife hardly ever gave me oral, but she always expected me to do it for her. At least his wife was enthusiastic about it, and it was the best I've ever had. Now she wants to tell her husband about what we've been doing. I guess we're both exhausted from this revenge affair, and it's gotten to a point where we can't stop. We were both so caught up in getting back at them that it became almost addictive. I'm planning to confront my wife soon. I've already got the divorce papers ready. Since we don't have any joint accounts or shared assets, it should be a straightforward process. The coworker's wife might face some challenges because of their kids, but she has the power to make him pay. I know this probably makes me sound like a terrible person, but I've already checked out of my marriage. I handed her the divorce papers on July 16th. I had to delay a bit to get a few things sorted out first, so I ended up serving the papers at her workplace. When she came home, I had already packed up her belongings and told her she needed to go stay with her dad. As expected, she did the usual routine, begging, apologizing, and even blaming me for her affair. I was ready for all of that. She was stubborn, though, and insisted she wasn't leaving and that she'd fix our marriage. I reminded her that the house belongs to my parents and their names are on the deed. If she didn't leave, I could easily have her evicted. I had already called her sister, thinking she'd come to take her away, but instead, her sister turned on me, saying I was a bad husband for giving up on my marriage so easily. That's when I got a bit petty and told her, it's pretty hypocritical. Coming from someone who left her husband for his cousin, looks like she's following in the family footsteps. She hit me, and I told her this was her final warning or I'd report her to the police for assault. After she left, the messages kept pouring in. I didn't block her because I wanted to screenshot most of them. She was sorry, begging me to take her back. Then she switched to mocking me, saying she never enjoyed our lovemaking and that she and her affair partner had sex on every piece of furniture in our house. I'm not sure how much of that is true, but I'm replacing the furniture regardless. I wanted to tell her that her affair partner's wife and I had defiled her car by having sex on it, but I held back. The most recent time we talked, she apologized once more, and this time it seemed more genuine. She admitted that she let things get out of hand and revealed that she's been considering having kids lately. As I've said before, I'm unable to have kids, and she was fully aware of that. She originally said she wanted to live without children, but now, in her mid-30s, she's developed a strong desire to be a mom. The fact that I couldn't give her that pushed her to cheat as a way to cope. She said she was wrong and that I was the best partner and husband anyone could ask for, but she just wanted more. I asked her why she didn't just talk to me about it. We could have adopted or gone to a sperm bank. I then asked if she was pregnant. She hesitated, but eventually murmured yes. I knew right then it wasn't my baby. Any hope of reconciliation was gone. Imagine if I hadn't discovered the affair, she would have tried to pass this pregnancy off as some miracle baby. I just congratulated her and wished her well with the baby. I want this divorce finalized as soon as possible. As for the affair partner's wife, she also served her husband with divorce papers and is ready to take him to the cleaners. She's not backing down. I've only talked to her a couple of times since then. She vented a lot about how she wasted her best years and youth on a man who turned out to be disgusting. She even mentioned how she gave up her modeling career to be with him. Honestly, I still think she's attractive. We haven't had much contact for a while. There was one time she drunk texted me, sending a sleazy picture and asking me to come over. I declined, and she later apologized for it. We're not planning on dating anytime soon, not until all the divorce proceedings are wrapped up. But I do miss her quite a bit. Now on to the next story. My wife betrayed me with my best friend. I'm going to ruin your career and make sure everyone knows what you both did. Jack and Emily, who are our dearest friends, have felt like family to my wife and me for many years, ever since we became neighbors. The four of us were practically joined at the hip. Our kids are the same age as theirs, and they all became fast friends. We were like one big family. We had dinner together a few times a week, and we even went on vacations as a group. I really considered Jack to be like a brother, and my wife and Emily were just as close. 5 months ago, I was completely blindsided when I discovered that my wife and Jack were having an affair. My wife had left her email open on our computer, and I noticed an email from her to her longtime therapist mentioning that Jack would be joining her for an upcoming session. Again. I mean, seriously? My mind started racing. Why on earth would Jack be going to her therapy sessions? And without me knowing, I searched through her emails and found more messages that confirmed Jack had been attending these sessions with her for about 6 weeks. I went through our phone records and discovered that, starting in late summer, they had been texting each other hundreds of times each day, with the count hitting nearly 500 texts a day by the holidays. Around that time, my wife and I had hosted both of our families, parents, siblings, everyone, for Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. Jack and Emily joined us either for the meal or afterward, on both occasions. The phone records showed that the entire time they were at our house celebrating with our families, my wife and Jack were texting each other across the room. They did this pretty much every time the four of us hung out, and it had been going on for months. And of course, they were doing it all day, every day in general. But what really gets to me is that they were doing it with Emily and me right there. When I confronted my wife with the evidence, she admitted that yes, she and Jack had fallen in love. "It just happened. I don't know how, but I love him, and I just don't feel anything for you anymore. I'm sorry," she said. They had gone on a school district trip together, something had happened in her hotel room, and things escalated quickly from there. She explained while I lay face down on the couch, unable to look at her, that they had already made plans to move out and divorce me and Emily. While they didn't intend to move in together right away because of the kids, they figured it would probably happen eventually. According to her, the sessions with the therapist were mainly about finding a way to break this to me and Emily as gently as possible, because they were so concerned about our well-being. Emily and I'm pretty sure they never planned on telling us about the affair and were just going to discover their feelings for each other down the road after they had come up with some other excuse to leave us. My wife moved out 2 months ago. I was, and still am, completely devastated. I cry every day. I even cried while writing these first few paragraphs. I'm always concerned about how this will impact our kids. But I'm not someone who just sits back quietly when I've been wronged. And in this situation, I was very, very wronged. A couple of years ago, Jack decided to run for a seat on the Board of Education, even though he was considered a pretty unlikely candidate. I helped him out with his campaign materials and debate preparation, and my wife, who was well known as a school district employee, this detail becomes important later, did her best to spread the word. Surprisingly, he ended up winning, but just barely, by a few dozen votes. Once he was on the board, it quickly became the center of Jack's life. He joined every committee he could. This led to the beginning of his affair with my wife, as they were constantly attending school events and meetings together during the evenings and weekends. After I uncovered the affair, my mind swiftly turned to thoughts of revenge, and I realized that an extramarital affair between a Board of Education member and a school district employee was at the very least a bad look politically, and it might even have violated district policies. To make matters worse for them, my wife was in the running for an open administrative position, and everyone knew she was practically guaranteed to get the job along with the significant pay raise that came with it. She had just completed her master's degree in school administration, encouraged by her principal and the superintendent, so she could step into this specific role. I had more than enough evidence of the affair, texts from both of them admitting to it, phone records showing they were texting each other hundreds of times a day, emails to and from the therapist, and so on. I thought about just emailing all the evidence to the board and the superintendent, but I figured that, as the heartbroken, betrayed spouse, I might not be viewed as a reliable source. So I was planning to show up at the next board meeting and publicly expose the two of them for their affair. I told my wife that I had tried to talk this person down, but couldn't promise they wouldn't show up and cause a scene. Just as I expected, this led Jack to decide that his only option was to admit the affair to the board preemptively. The superintendent then advised him to resign, which he did. Emily mentioned that he was utterly humiliated and crushed, and he barely got out of bed for a few days afterward. As word of the affair and Jack's resignation began to spread, the superintendent, who had been a longtime friend of both my wife and Jack, contacted my wife and tearfully informed her that it was no longer politically appropriate for her to be promoted to an administrative position within the district. The job that had been lined up for her was eventually filled by an external candidate. This news sent waves of confusion and rumors throughout the district, as it was widely assumed that my wife was going to get the position. The day after she was told she wouldn't be getting the promotion, my wife and I, despite the state of our crumbling marriage, took our son out to breakfast for his birthday. While we were at the restaurant, a parent came over to our table to congratulate her on the new job. She smiled and thanked them, then quietly excused herself to shed some tears in the bathroom. I let things settle down for a couple of weeks, and then, right before my wife moved out, I revealed my little secret to them. There was never any furious friend threatening to expose their affair. It was just me. Word of all this has spread around our small town, where Jack grew up and where my wife has worked for nearly 20 years. My wife refuses to discuss how things are going at work now, but I've heard from some people in the district that her once spotless reputation has taken a serious hit. Jack, who used to be the life of the party in our neighborhood and at local events, has practically disappeared. And he barely even comes out to mow the lawn. He's moving soon, to a shabby little townhouse, about all he can afford with the child support he's now on the hook for. Despite the public humiliation, my wife and Jack claim they're going to try to make their relationship work. I wish them all the best with that. I'm sure it'll be a real treat for them to show up together in town. Here are some answers to common questions I've been asked. Are you and Emily a thing now? You should totally be a thing. That would be awesome. No, we're just friends. We've become incredibly important to each other since all this started, and we've definitely grown closer, but not in the way everyone might be thinking. This whole mess would be so much harder to deal with if I didn't have her to lean on, and she says the same about me. After all, we're going through the exact same situation with the same people. Jack hasn't moved out yet, but once he does, we plan to start getting the kids together more often, like they used to. Of course, it'll never be quite the same. She does bring the kids over sometimes, but it's tough with Jack still living right across the street. Didn't your revenge hurt both sets of kids? Not really. Jack has a regular job. The Board of Education was more of a hobby and passion for him, so this didn't affect his income. And my wife has been assured that if she wants to pursue an administrative position in another district, she'll get glowing letters of recommendation from her superintendent and principal. She'll have to give up a lot of work relationships in the process, but with her reputation taking a hit, I'm guessing she'll make that move sooner rather than later. In the meantime, not taking the administrative job means she still has summers off to spend with the kids. Why do you call her your wife instead of your ex-wife? We're still working through the divorce mediation, so it's not final yet, but it will be soon. Why didn't you notice all the texting your wife was doing? Well, I did notice, and it was really starting to annoy me. It was excessive. She has a big social circle and tends to text a lot anyway, but it was getting way over the top, to the point where she was completely ignoring me and the kids. At one point in November, I asked her to agree to a no phones at the dinner table rule. She reluctantly agreed, but then she'd just sulk through dinner, and eventually she started using her phone during dinner again. All that said, I was blind. Not only was the texting getting strange, but her relationship with Jack was starting to make me uncomfortable. Emily noticed it too and agreed. We confronted them a couple of times about it directly, and they both swore up and down that it was just school stuff they were discussing, nothing else. And for whatever reason, we believed them, probably because it's easier to ignore what you don't want to see.